History has tried to silence a name. For centuries, voices have been raised, trying to dilute his presence, transform his trajectory into myth, his pain into metaphor, and his message into invention. But, contrary to what was expected, the more they tried to erase him, the louder the name echoed, Jesus of Nazareth. And we are not just talking about faith, but about evidence, facts, documents, stones, and records. Mel Gibson, known not only for his intense performance in Hollywood, but also for his courage to touch on topics that most people avoid, brought a powerful revelation to light on the podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience. In blunt terms, Gibson declared, Jesus is not a legend. He was a real man, recorded by enemies and confirmed by records and findings that defy time. The power of these words lies not only in the conviction of those who say them, but in what they convey. They are accompanied by centuries of archaeological discoveries, documentary analysis, and testimonies that place Jesus on an equal footing, or even superior to, central figures in ancient history. Modern skepticism, however loud it may be, finds itself cornered by evidence that cannot be ignored. And it is precisely at this point that the journey begins, not with a sermon, but with an invitation to investigate. Before we dive into the evidence, an exercise in honesty is in order, a simple yet profound question. Do you believe in the existence of Jesus, whether as a historical figure, an ordinary man of Judea, or the Son of God? What do you think of him? Regardless of your answer, what will be presented here may challenge your certainties, reinforce your faith, or plant a sincere doubt. And it is in this doubt that truth begins to emerge. In the historical context, Jesus appeared during one of the most turbulent periods of the ancient world. Judea, under Roman rule, was a turbulent, tense province marked by religious and political conflicts. It was a land where oppression and hope walked side by side. It was in this scenario that a man without wealth, military power, or political position began to attract crowds. He preached love, forgiveness, compassion, and a kingdom that was not of this world. His words were soft as a whisper, but they had an impact like thunder. They deeply disturbed the religious and political leaders of the time, not because he incited violence, but because he showed a path that threatened the structures of power. As the Gospels record and external sources confirm, Jesus' public life was short but intense, and his death, decreed by Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, would mark not the end, but the beginning of a movement that would shake the world. The figure of Jesus, as a historical figure, is today recognized as real by serious historians, including non-Christians. Mel Gibson highlighted a revealing fact. More than 40 ancient documents directly mention Jesus. Now compare that to the Emperor Tiberius, one of the most powerful figures in ancient Rome, who appears in only 10 records. That's right, a carpenter from Galilee is mentioned 4 times more than the leader of the entire Roman Empire. It is intriguing. How could a simple man, with no statues erected in his honor, no coins bearing his image, leave so much evidence in writings, papyri, and quotations? This is the kind of question that forces us to go beyond what we have been taught or not taught, and that is what we will begin to do now. Let's look at the archaeological evidence. In 1961, a discovery made in Caesarea Maritima changed the course of historical research on the Gospels, the Pilate Stone. This Latin inscription confirms that Pontius Pilate was, in fact, the governor of Judea at the time Jesus was crucified. A piece that, before its discovery, was considered impossible to find by many scholars. The stone is now on display at the Israel Museum and serves as concrete proof that the biblical accounts were correct regarding Pilate and his political activities. Another crucial discovery was made in 1990, just outside Jerusalem, the Caiaphas ossuary, a stone burial box with the inscription, "Joseph, son of Caiaphas." According to the Gospels, Caiaphas was the high priest who conducted the trial of Jesus. Analysis confirmed that the remains there belonged to a man of approximately 60 years old, compatible with the age of Caiaphas at the time described in the sacred texts. For Mel Gibson, this discovery has enormous symbolic weight. He said that one night his daughter asked him if Jesus was real or just a story. Instead of trying to convince her through faith, he showed her the photo of the Caiaphas ossuary. He explained who he was, the role he played in the trial of Jesus, and how the inscription had been validated by Israeli experts. The girl's answer was simple but powerful. If the accuser existed, so did the accused. This purity of reasoning, Gibson says, is what we need to reclaim, because often it is intellectual arrogance that blinds us to the obvious. The truth is there, but we prefer to complicate it with theories and suspicions that, deep down, serve more to protect the ego than to discover reality. And it doesn't stop there. In 2002, another ossuary caused a stir. The James ossuary, which bears the inscription in Aramaic, "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus." Its authenticity has been debated, it's true, but chemical tests have indicated that the inscription is compatible with the 1st century. Although names like James, Joseph, and Jesus were common, the combination of the three points to a strong possibility of a link with the figure mentioned by Paul of Tarsus in his letters, the brother of Jesus. These archaeological pieces are more than just relics. They are clues, fragments of a story that many try to erase or turn into metaphor, but that insists on presenting itself as fact. And this leads us to an inevitable question. How much evidence is needed for us to stop calling something a myth? If you've made it this far, you're about to dive even deeper into this fascinating universe of discoveries. Archaeology is not a mystical science. It is not based on feelings or assumptions. It is a cold, objective, and sometimes even skeptical discipline. Precisely for this reason, when an ancient narrative like that of Jesus resists archaeological analysis, gaining confirmation in excavations, inscriptions, and remains, it is not only a religion that is strengthened, but history itself that is confirmed. It is at this point that the narrative of Jesus gains a strength that few religious, political, or philosophical leaders have managed to maintain over the centuries. Unlike many myths and legends, which are lost in symbolic mists, Jesus is engraved in stone, literally. And that's not all. He is present in non-Christian historical records, such as those of Flavius Josephus, a 1st-century Jewish historian, and Tacitus, one of the greatest chroniclers of the Roman Empire. Both make direct references to Jesus, his crucifixion, and the growing movement that was forming around his name. Neither was Christian. On the contrary, their texts even show a certain contempt for the followers of the Christ. And precisely for that reason, they have even more value. Josephus, in his work Jewish Antiquities, writes about James, the brother of Jesus, called the Christ. Tacitus, when speaking about Nero, mentions that the emperor blamed the Christians for the fire in Rome, and says that the name Christians comes from Christ, who was executed by Pontius Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. We are not talking about religious texts, but about secular historians reporting facts naturally. This shows that, even outside the sphere of faith, Jesus was already recognized as an indisputable historical figure. Mel Gibson, when addressing this issue, said something shocking. If you take the resurrection out of the equation, Jesus is still one of the most quoted, remembered, analyzed, and loved men in human history. That in itself is a miracle. His analysis goes beyond religion. He invites us to observe the impact that a single man, poor, marginalized, and executed in the most humiliating way possible, had on the course of Western civilization. But what makes this story even more powerful is what happens after his death. A movement that by Roman logic should have died along with its leader explodes in growth. Within a few years, Jesus' followers were in every part of the empire, not armed, not enforcing laws by the sword, but offering forgiveness, love, and a new way of life, something so absurd for the world at the time that many modern historians call it the most unlikely revolution in history. The persecution of Christians began early, and this is another historical fact that proves the existence of an original core that refused to deny what they saw and experienced. No one gives their life for a farce. No one dies crucified, burned alive, thrown to the lions, or beheaded because they believed in a pretty metaphor. The first Christians died affirming, "We saw, he lives," and the impact of this reached even the enemies themselves. In Rome, in the Colosseum, where the blood of Christian martyrs stained the sand, faith in Jesus grew with each new spectacle of horror. An empire that believed in strength, opulence, domination, and multiple gods was slowly being taken over by the message of a man who said, "Blessed are those who mourn, the meek, the pure in heart." Now think about it. If all this were just a legend, a beautiful myth invented by fishermen and peasants, do you think Rome would have trembled before this story? Do you think a myth could turn the world upside down? Another interesting point, raised by Gibson, is the authenticity of the Gospels. Many modern critics say that the texts have been modified over the centuries. However, what we observe with the manuscripts of the New Testament is exactly the opposite, an impressive textual fidelity. Today, we have more than 5,800 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament, in addition to thousands of ancient translations in Latin, Coptic, Syriac, and other languages. When compared with each other, they show a textual consistency rate of over 99%. No other ancient text comes close to this. To give you an idea, Homer's Iliad, considered an indisputable classic, has just over 600 known manuscripts, and yet it is taught as indisputable literary truth in universities. So why is the New Testament so disturbing? Perhaps because it doesn't just tell a story, it proposes a transformation. It's not enough to read it, you have to choose a side, and that, for many, is uncomfortable. Gibson understands this discomfort well. When he produced The Passion of the Christ, he faced fierce criticism. He was accused of everything. He was told he was being too violent, too realistic, too faithful to what the text said. But that was exactly the point. To show what was hidden, to show the cost of love that transforms. Behind all this, there is a question that resonates. Why do so many forces unite to try to erase this man? Why is Jesus still so dangerous to the system even after 2 millennia? Perhaps because, deep down, even those who say they do not believe feel that there is something there that challenges what the world has taught us to venerate: power, ego, control, domination. Jesus, by his mere existence, turns all of this upside down. By this point in the script, you have realized that the story of Jesus is not supported by faith alone. It is supported by facts, by names, by stones, by bones, by ancient handwritten ink. It is supported by martyrs, by persecutions, by archaeological reconstructions, and by rigorously preserved testimonies. And what comes next is even more surprising, because now we will enter an even deeper dimension, the spiritual, emotional, and social impact that this figure has had to this day, even in skeptical and intellectually prepared hearts. And it is there that many, even without wanting to, realize that they are not just in front of a man, but of something or someone that transcends time. If you liked this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to help us grow. Comment below a word or phrase that caught your attention and show that you stayed until the end of the video.